the Archdiocese published the Manual for Parish Pastoral Councils. And that was an update to some guidelines that were published in 1985. So for 25 years, the Archdiocese was operating under guidelines that really gave us the structure that we're all familiar with in parishes, with parish councils and finance councils and various committees throughout the parish. The binder, the Manual for Parish Pastoral Councils, included some historical information that gave some background on how we got to have these parish pastoral councils. And it really went back to the history of the early church, really to the days of the Acts of the Apostles, where all of the baptized were expected and responsible for spreading the faith. So by the nature of their baptism, each new member was expected to go out and evangelize and spread the good news that they had found. As time went on and as the church grew and became this, what we know as today as this worldwide organization, there was a requirement for leaders. And throughout the centuries, there was more and more hierarchy that was built into the church just to deal with the size of the organization. And if we fast forward to the 1950s, when I was growing up, and perhaps when some of you were early in your life, the pattern in the church was very much where the priests and religious were really doing most of the work. And those of us in the laity really only had three main responsibilities. One was to pray. The second was to obey the rules of the church. And the third was to support the work of the priests and religious through our contributions. And that was really most of what was expected of the laity at that time. Sometimes you'll hear that referred to as pray, pay, and obey. Vatican II then was begun 50 years ago in the 60s, early 60s. And as the documents came out of Vatican II, there was a lot of focus on this early responsibility that all baptized people had at the beginning of the church, that the laity were as responsible for spreading the faith and supporting the church through actions and through their gifts as anyone else. And from those documents, canon law was revised, and in 1983, part of canon law stated that each diocese should have a pastoral council to advise the bishop in the work that the bishop is doing. So in the Archdiocese of Dubuque, we have an Archdiocesan Pastoral Council that is made up of representatives from throughout the Archdiocese, and they're an advisory body to the Archbishop. That council meets on a quarterly basis and really works in accordance with that definition that's found in canon law. Canon law also states that it's up to the Archbishop's discretion whether or not the diocese should have parish pastoral councils. So that's not something that's required in canon law. It's something that's left to the discretion of the bishop. Obviously, in the Archdiocese of Dubuque, the bishop decided that we should have parish pastoral councils to advise the pastor, much in the same way as the Archdiocesan Pastoral Council advises the Archbishop. In 1985, then, as these councils were being developed, these guidelines were published. The original guidelines were published, and some of you may be familiar with them, and they've served the Archdiocese very well. They created the structure that we now have today. So why was there a revision? Well, the revision wasn't so much a change as it was an enhancement or an emphasis on some things that were in those original guidelines that we didn't fully realize. And so that the revision gave us an opportunity to kind of refocus on the purpose of the role of the laity in leadership within parishes. It certainly didn't diminish the role of the pastor or for the religious members or deacons who are working in parishes, but it did shine the light on the responsibility that we have as laity. Then some of you may recall that in the late 90s, a project or an effort entitled Vision 2000 was begun and completed throughout the Archdiocese. And what resulted was a document called Vision 2000 that was published in late 1999, and it was described as the vision or the strategic plan for the Archdiocese in the 21st century. And that document still is the plan for the Archdiocese in the 21st century. So we really have two main documents that guide our efforts in parish life. One are these Parish Pastoral Council guidelines that were published in August of 2009. And the second document that really coincides with it is Vision 2000. I might add, as we're moving along here, that your microphones are muted. You probably are aware of that. But you do have the opportunity to ask questions. You can do that on the control panel, the webinar control panel that's on your screen. You'll see a spot for you to type in a question, and you can send that to Rick and me during the webinar. And as questions come in, if we can answer them immediately, we'll do so, or we will let you know that we'll find the answer and respond back to you. But feel free to ask questions whenever you see the need. When we talk specifically about the Finance Council, it's interesting to note that even before the Parish Pastoral Council guidelines were published in 2009, that there were norms that were promulgated by Archbishop Hannes in March of 2008. And those give very specific directions on how the Finance Council should operate in the parish. Those are included in the Parish Pastoral Council guidelines. And in addition, on pages 42 to 44, you received that attachment from me in an email today. You will find that there are some additional functions of the Finance Council that are listed to give additional guidance on exactly what the roles and responsibilities are for those of you that are members of the Finance Council. I mentioned canon law, and one of the other things in canon law is a statement that says every parish will have a Finance Council. So it's very clear that every parish in every archdiocese or every diocese will have a Finance Council that will look after the financial concerns of the parish. As we talk about, well, how does that council, the Finance Council, relate with the Parish Pastoral Council? Some people get the impression that because canon law says that the Finance Council, you must have a Finance Council, but that the Parish Pastoral Council is optional, left to the discretion of the bishop, that perhaps then the Finance Council is really the ultimate authority in a parish. Well, in the Archdiocese of Dubuque, that would not be true. In the Archdiocese of Dubuque, the Finance Council is an advisory body to the Pastoral Council. So when working in developing a budget or providing reports on income and expenditures and giving advice on decisions related to financial matters, the Finance Council, with its expertise, provides advice and counsel to the Parish Pastoral Council. The Parish Pastoral Council then can consider that advice, deliberate more, perhaps ask for more information, but then can reach its own decision based on that advice that's coming from the Finance Council. And whether or not the Pastoral Council changes that advice, when the Pastoral Council has reached some kind of a decision, then that decision becomes a recommendation to the pastor, who will act on behalf of the parish. In the guidelines, in terms of membership, it states that members to the Finance Council are appointed by the pastor. So the Finance Council members are not elected. They're not simple volunteers. They are people who the pastor seeks out who have particular expertise in the area of finance, and the pastor appoints them to terms on the Finance Council. The guidelines also state that the Finance Council should have somewhere between 3 and 7 members. Now, to get in more detail about what that means, Rick's going to spend some time on the functions that are listed on page 43. If you have that in front of you, that's great. If you don't, Rick will refer to them, and you can refer to those on paper at a later time.
Okay, so hello again, everyone, and appreciate your taking the time out of your busy schedules to be with us here tonight. What I hope to accomplish is to make you aware of what some of the practices are in the Archdiocese related to parish finances, let you know why those practices are what they are, and if nothing else, give you an introduction to me and my office so that if you need assistance at any time going forward, you can at least put a voice to a name and feel comfortable in contacting the finance office here at the Archdiocese. As Dan alluded to, there are 14 different functions listed relating to the Finance Council. I kind of wanted to point out several of those this evening for you. First of all, numbers 2, 4, 5, and 6 are all very much intertwined. I say that because number 2 is to research, prepare, and submit to the Pastoral Council an annual budget, ensuring that the financial resources and goals are compatible based upon stewardship and the parish mission. It is a requirement that every parish in the Archdiocese complete an annual budget, and that information is used in terms of statistical reporting as well as sharing information, anonymous or unidentified information between parishes of similar size and budgets. That annual budget is actually submitted when the annual financial report is submitted to the Archdiocese. Excuse me. About a month from now, your parish will be asked to submit an annual financial report for the financial activity for the fiscal year ending June 30th of 2012, along with that budget for fiscal year ending June 30th of 2013. Along with that budgeting and financial reporting, it's a function of the Finance Council to present to the Pastoral Council on a regular basis throughout the course of the fiscal year financial statements. In larger parishes, we expect and recommend that those financial statements and that information is shared on a monthly basis. When we get into the medium and smaller size parishes, we realize that frequency might not be necessary. So oftentimes then we'll look at it as happening on a quarterly basis. One other thing I'd like to point out to you in the norms is that under number 7, it's indicated that the Finance Council is to develop and recommend parish personnel policies, including employment agreements and salary and benefit packages. In terms of the actual agreements and documents, I'm happy to let you know that here at the Archdiocesan level, we have an Office of Human Resources, and the Human Resources Director, Lynn Osterhaus, has several of those documents that you can use as a template or boilerplate in operating at your parish. A little bit later, I'll talk about some of the fringe benefit programs we have available to you too. So again, I would hope that we would be a good resource for you and that you're not recreating the wheel, as they say, with regards to any of these items. The other thing I'd point out is that starting with item number 11 through 14, those items all deal with the physical plant of the parish. As I told a group earlier today, when I first became involved with my parish back in the 80s, we had a buildings and grounds committee. Those committees don't exist today, but rather the responsibilities, the functions that were completed by that committee are now the responsibility of the finance committee. In a perfect world, you would see a parish having a 5-year rolling forward budget in terms of capital improvements and expenditures that need to be made, And accompanying that plan would be a plan for financing those things. We know we're not quite that lucky to be able to do that in the church, but we do need to make sure that on a regular basis we're addressing the needs of our physical plant as well. So wanted to point that out to you at this point in time. Next, I think it's important that you know by way of background what the corporate structure is of your particular parish. In the Archdiocese of Dubuque, each parish is a separate civil corporation. They're a separate civil corporation registered here in the state of Iowa, and through the Articles of Incorporation are granted tax-exempt status here in the state of Iowa. Each corporation has a 5-person board of directors. The ex officio president of each of these corporations is the Archbishop. The ex officio vice president is the Vicar General. Earlier in his talk, Dan alluded to canon law or church law. This is one area where the two laws that we need to comply with, if you will, somewhat mesh together. Under both structures, the Archbishop and Vicar General have responsibilities with regards to the canon and civil law. The pastor or the secretary treasurer is the pastor, or in some parishes, the parish life coordinator. And then the 2 lay directors are the chair of the pastoral council and the finance council chair as well. When we talk about what action is required of the corporate board of directors, it's important to understand and to realize what the decision-making process is. Any type of project that is significant in financial nature, the Finance Council will advise and make recommendations to the Pastoral Council. Pastoral Council will discuss it and make a recommendation to the pastor, as well then as the 2 other lay directors, the chair of the Pastoral Council and the Finance Council. Assuming that they are all in agreement and feel that that is the way to proceed for the parish, they then seek the consent of the Archbishop and the Vicar General, or the president and the vice president of the corporation as well. Would be very difficult for the Archbishop and Vicar General to be involved in these discussions locally, so they're asked to vote on that by proxy. And so that process consists of a proxy request form being submitted to my office. That request form is signed by the pastor and the 2 lay directors to verify that the discussion has gone through the proper process at the local level. I review it, try and anticipate any questions that may come up by the president and vice president of the corporation, try and answer those questions, ultimately submit it to them for review and approval. And I can tell you quite sincerely that both the Archbishop and the Vicar General put a lot of faith and confidence in the local discussion and leadership. It's been my experience over the years that more than 99% of these proxy requests get approved when they're submitted. So again, it's more from a standpoint of making sure that the I's are dotted and T's are crossed from the standpoint of civil law. You may ask what types of decisions need the vote of the corporate board. First of all, it's any expenditure, any extraordinary expenditure that I would classify in excess of $5,000. So if you're a large parish and during the winter or summer, your utility bills are in excess of $5,000, that would not require a proxy vote of the board. But if you have some type of major repair that needs to take place, purchase of equipment, or other expenditure over $5,000, that does require that vote of the corporate board. Other transactions include the acquisition or the sale of property, regardless of the dollar amount involved. And again, the process is to submit those requests to my office for review and submission for approval. I'd like to head next into what I call some collaborative efforts in the Archdiocese that really, first of all, make us strong as an archdiocese, but most importantly, really, I think should be a benefit to the parishes throughout the archdiocese as well. First of all, we have a deposit and loan fund, which we refer to as the DNL, and I describe this as the central bank for the archdiocese. Parishes and other entities as well that have excess funds can invest those excess funds in the DNL and earn a specified rate of return. Those deposits are treated like savings accounts in that the parish begins receiving interest the day the monies are deposited and earn interest until the day the monies are withdrawn. There aren't any restrictions in terms of how long the money has to be invested in the DNL or anything like that. As an aside to that, then, parishes that are in need of borrowing can borrow from the DNL as well. Those loans might be for capital expenditures, it might be for major renovations, it could be for property acquisition. Sometimes, quite frankly, we have parishes that need to borrow for operations. It might be more of just a cash flow issue, short term, in that they need money until a major fundraising event is held, or maybe the end of the year collection comes in, or it might be of a more long term nature. And so those parishes are able to borrow from our deposit and loan fund as well. Our policy has always been that we maintain a half a point spread between the interest that's paid on deposits and the interest charged on loans. If you're aware of the investment markets right now, especially interest rates, you know that most financial institutions aren't paying much by way of interest. Though it's not a lot, the deposit and loan fund is paying 1% on all deposits at this point in time. And more importantly, those parishes that are in need of borrowing are able to borrow at 1.5%. You may hear locally, you may hear it in other parishes where a parish or a school has borrowed from the archdiocese. That archdiocese isn't our building here at 1229 Mount Loretta, the administrative offices, but rather it's collectively all the parishes and schools in the archdiocese that have made deposits in the DNL fund. In my experience talking to my peers in other dioceses, I know some dioceses do not have deposit and loan funds. Others may have them, but that they don't make loans from those DNL funds, or they may be in a position where their loan requests exceed what's on deposit. So the DNL has to borrow money in order to be able to make loans to the parishes. Not a good situation, obviously. So we've always been very blessed. On average, we run 2 to 3 deposit to loan ratio, which from our standpoint is very good, because once the parish has gone through all the hoops, if you will, to get to the point where a loan is approved, we don't have to ask the question here, now where are we going to get the money? Another area where we've got good collaboration is in that fringe benefits package for employees of the archdiocese. Any of you that have any dealings with health insurance know that health insurance is a big problem in our country today. And as a small employer, any of our parishes would have a tough time providing affordable health insurance to the parish employees on their own. But when we gather together here in the Archdiocese of Dubuque, and all of our parishes and schools operate under one comprehensive plan, we're able to accomplish that. So Currently, we have a health insurance plan that offers 4 different options in terms of deductibles and out-of-pocket expenses. Under that plan, we have about 575 contracts that cover over 1,000 lives. I'd like to think that, with that size, first of all, we are offering an affordable product to our employees out there, as well as being a big enough plan in that we're able to spread the risk throughout a fairly large population. It's up to the local parish to decide how much of that premium that the parish will pay, and as a result, what will be left for the individual to pay as an employee contribution. Along with our health insurance package, we also offer term life insurance, long-term and short-term disability, and we have a IRS-approved 401k retirement plan as well. The 401k plan allows for employer contributions, it allows for employee contributions, and it allows for employer matching of employee contributions. Lastly, and just as importantly, is our property and liability insurance program, referred to as the Dubuque Archdiocesan Protection Program, or DAP. Back in the very early 1970s, administration discovered that insurance was becoming a real crisis issue in the parishes. Some parishes were going uninsured, others were going underinsured. Some parishes weren't even able to obtain insurance. And so in the Archdiocese of Dubuque, very similar to what was happening in other dioceses across the country, they established a self-insured program. Basically, the way the self-insurance program works is that all the entities pay premiums into the plan. Those premium dollars are used to pay any claims against any of those covered entities, and the excess reserves remain, the property of the fund. Now, let me back up a second. That self-insured plan then covers property, it covers the liability, as well as workers' compensation. Throughout the course of the 70s and 80s and well into the 90s, the plan was very successful from a financial standpoint. Premiums far exceeded the claims against the plan. So administration was faced with the fortunate decision, I guess, if you will. Do we keep accumulating money in the plan, or do we reduce premiums to those that are covered under the plan? And it was the pretty unanimous decision of the powers to be that premiums would be lowered so that the monies could stay in the parishes to further the mission of the parish in other ways, shapes, and forms. One other thing that administration recognized is that here in the Archdiocese of Dubuque, we have a very strong commitment to Catholic education. That strong commitment doesn't come without a price. And so the decision was made in the early 90s to forgive or to not charge any of the high schools any insurance. And later on in the 90s, it was also decided to forgive the insurance for any grade schools. So we hope that forgiveness has filtered back into the parishes, and that as a result, it eases the burden of the parish subsidies and support assessments that they've paid to support the schools. I'm going to take a break here just for a second. I see there's a question. It says, are there any plans to raise the limit on the proxy above $5,000? Good question. That's a question that we received earlier today. And as I explained to the earlier group, the $5,000 proxy limit was intended to be a one-size-fits-all proposition, in that, for larger parishes, quite frankly, $5,000 can be spent pretty easily on something that's pretty obvious needs to be done. The problem is that rule, the 5,000 limit, also applies to the medium and the smaller size parishes. In one of our smaller parishes, $5,000 can be a very significant number. So that's the reason why it's at 5,000. But again, as I explained to the group earlier today, it has been a while since that number has been discussed. And also, we are looking for feedback from these webinars that we're having. So I will be sure to pass it on to Archbishop Hannes and to the Archdiocesan Finance Council that are responsible for recommending that amount to him, and let him know that it did come up a couple of times during the course of our webinars. To finally finish on the Dubuque Archdiocesan Protection Program here, as I mentioned, through the course of the 90s, we were very successful. The program was very profitable. Fast forward to 2000, the tide has turned for us financially. Been a combination of many different things. First of all, we have had some settlements that have been made to victims of sexual misconduct that have been a drain on the fund. You may remember back to 2008, the flooding that occurred in the archdiocese, in the state of Iowa here, and specifically within the archdiocese. That caused a major hit on our program. For whatever reason, we went through a stretch of about 5 years here where other, what I would refer to as normal losses, have exceeded the historical norms. And then finally, the plan that allowed for the reduction in premiums was dependent upon historical norms in terms of return on investments. And I often refer to the period from 2000 to 2010 as the lost decade in terms of investment returns, because basically for that 10-year period, everything was flat. So that combination of the different claims and the absence of normal investment returns has taken a significant hit on the program. Over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, we've increased premiums, getting those back closer to what they would be in the commercial market. And I'm of the opinion now that we're getting to the point where we're going to stop the bleeding and get the program back in the black in terms of the financial status. And at that point in time, we'll try and do what's prudent in terms of looking at the premiums for the plan going forward. One other thing that I think that it's important that you hear from me tonight is, what is the Archdiocesan taxa, what it is, and what it's used for. The taxa is basically one of the means of financial support for the archdiocesan administrative offices. Each parish, as we talked about earlier, submits an annual financial report. We have a person on staff here that goes through those financial reports and calculates the taxa, if you will, and then that taxa is billed out to the parishes in semi-annual installments, normally at the beginning of November, and then the other half sometime in February. So what your parish will be billed in November here is based upon the financial operations for the June 30th, 2012 fiscal year. In terms of what it supports, one thing that Dan sent out to all of you today is a directory of pastoral center services. In that directory, you'll find a list of each office and a brief description of what it does here. And that's probably the best way for you to get an understanding of what the taxa is used for. As I mentioned, that's just one of the sources of support for the offices here. We also are able to gain some support from investment income as well as other fees that we charge for specific services. The taxa formula basically takes the parish income, and again, recognizing that tremendous commitment to Catholic education makes adjustments for educational expenditures. So if a parish operates a K through 6 or a K through 8 grade school, or is affiliated with a grade school via support formula, 65% of all that parish income is forgiven in computing the taxa. If it supports a K through 12 program, 85% of that income is forgiven. We do have a few parishes that are only associated by formula to a high school, so 20% of their income is forgiven. We have some parishes that aren't affiliated by formula, but as a matter of parish policy, contribute towards the cost of education of students from their parish attending another school. That outright support is deducted in determining the parish taxable income as well. And then finally, most parishes operate a religious education program, so the net amount that the parish spends on that religious education program is deducted from parish income as well. Once that taxable income number, if you will, is computed, then the tax is assessed at a rate of 11.75%. In other dioceses, you may hear people talk about a diocesan appeal or a bishop's appeal. There, they may not have a taxa, or they may have that appeal in addition to the taxa. That's their way of raising money for archdiocesan administration. And in those instances, oftentimes parishes are given goals that they need to meet in terms of the appeal from their particular parish. And to the extent that they don't achieve those goals, the difference comes out of the parish operating budget. I don't want to keep you too long tonight. Something else that's not part of the PowerPoint that I'd just like to make you aware of real quickly here is that one of the services from the finance office is we have a person that will go out and do financial reviews of parishes. Our person will actually review the financial statements and issue a report and make recommendations with regards to the policies and the procedures that the parish follows in terms of finances. If you're one of those parishes that had a pastor leave today or a new pastor arrive, you probably have an audit scheduled for the upcoming months. It may have already occurred the last few months here. But if you're not one of those parishes, ask the question if an audit has ever been done at your parish and see if the report is still available. I think it'd be helpful for you to read through the comments and recommendations section of that report to see, how your parish is doing in terms of its internal control policies and procedures. If someone knows that an audit was done but they can't find the report there, let us know and we'll put another copy of that report into your hands. Okay, at this point in time, I'm going to turn it back over to Dan.
As we begin to wind up this presentation, I want to spend a little bit of time just giving you a preview of what we plan for next year. And during that time, if you have questions that have come up related to what we've talked about in the webinar tonight, feel free to ask those questions via your keyboard, and if we can answer them before we conclude formally, we will be very happy to do that. I mentioned at the beginning of our presentation the 2009 guidelines that were published, and as you may recall, there was a significant amount of in-service activity that went on during that year, and we found that it was delivered in varying levels of success in parishes, and that was one of the reasons why we decided to do these orientation webinars this summer. In addition to knowing that some of that information didn't get to the people who really needed it, we know that in the last 3 years, new members would have come on board to the Finance Council in some parishes, to other committees and councils as well. So the purpose of these webinars in the future will be primarily for those who are new to their roles in the parish. I would encourage you, as you look to the future when we get to next summer, that you, as you find new people coming on board in leadership roles, that you advise them to contact the parish office to find out when a summer webinar will be delivered in their area. We'll be doing something, again, very similar to what we're doing this year. But again, the new members will be our primary target next year. Something that we'll also add early in 2013 is a webinar related to parish elections. And it will cover not only the mechanics of conducting a parish election, which is normally done in May, but we're going to do it early, so it will provide some advice on how you might help people discern whether or not they're being called to leadership roles in the parish. That will enable you to have a ballot that has qualified people who are willing to run. So that's the plan in the future, and we would ask you to look forward to that next year and promote that. Meanwhile, these webinars are being recorded. We know that not everyone can participate in these webinars live, and we have found that many people who have participated have asked if they could somehow get this to present to others within the parish. So yes, these webinars are being recorded, and they will be made available, we hope, on the Archdiocese website later this summer. When we have the process of doing that ironed out, we will provide that information to your pastor and to your parish staff through the Archdiocese official bulletin. That comes out twice a month, and it provides information to anyone who's on staff in the Archdiocese. So if you think that this would be something that would be useful to use in a meeting at your parish, I'd recommend that you contact your parish office later this summer before Labor Day, and they should have information that they can provide to you. If you can't get answers to your questions to your parish staff, or if you have other questions specific for Rick or for me, feel free to contact us at our email addresses, which you see on the screen, or through our phone numbers on the screen as well. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have related to finance or in any other area. Sometimes questions will come in and we may not be the person to answer it, but we can find the person who will be available who can answer the question for you. That concludes the formal part of our presentation tonight. We will leave the webinar software open for a few moments after we conclude formally. In case you happen to have a last-minute question, we'll leave that open. You can send that to us via your computer keyboard. And again, we'll collect that information and distribute the answers later. Thanks for your participation tonight. We appreciate your feedback. You will get, when you close out tonight, you will get a request to provide feedback immediately. If you have some feedback, we'd certainly be anxious to hear that immediately. You also will get the opportunity later this summer when we'll be conducting a more formal assessment of this webinar series. So look forward to that as well. We'd appreciate any kind of feedback that you could give us, not only on the technical aspects of these webinars, but on the content of the webinars as well. So again, thank you for your participation and have a pleasant evening. Good night.